thing about summer ending is that everyone's in a hurry to squeeze out those last few moments of freedom before reality crashes back in. I learned that lesson the hard way 3 years ago, and I still can't look at a lake without my stomach turning. My name's Cameron, and what I'm about to tell you happened during what should have been the perfect final weekend of August 2021. My uncle owned this cabin up in northern Wisconsin, right on the edge of Lake Vermilion. Quiet place, the kind where you can hear every cricket, every ripple in the water. He'd let me stay there sometimes when I needed to clear my head, and that late summer, I definitely needed it. College was starting in 2 weeks. My relationship had just imploded, and I figured a few days alone would help me reset. I packed light, just clothes, some books, enough food for 3 days. The drive up was beautiful. All those trees starting to hint at autumn colors, the air getting that crisp edge to it. I got there Friday evening, just as the sun was dipping below the tree line. The cabin was exactly how I remembered it. Small, cozy, with that musty smell old lake houses always have. There was a dock that stretched maybe 30 feet into the water, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile down the shore. Complete isolation. That first night was perfect. I grilled some burgers, watched the stars come out, listened to the gentle lap of water against the dock pilings. But I noticed something odd before I went to bed. There were wet footprints on the dock. Not mine. These were bigger, and they came from the water. Walked to the edge of the dock nearest the cabin, then just stopped. No prints leading back. I figured maybe someone had been swimming earlier in the day, though it seemed weird my uncle hadn't mentioned anyone else using the property. I was tired from the drive, so I didn't think much more about it. Saturday started normally enough. I spent the morning reading on the porch, occasionally glancing at the water. The lake was perfectly still like glass. Around noon, I decided to take the kayak out. The paddle was relaxing, therapeutic even, until I got about 100 yards from shore. That's when I saw it, or rather felt it. You know that sensation when you're swimming and something brushes your leg? Except I wasn't in the water. Something had bumped the kayak from underneath, hard enough to rock it. I froze, paddle suspended over the water. The lake was deep there, maybe 40 feet. The water so dark you couldn't see more than a few inches down. I waited, my heart starting to pound. Nothing, just that oppressive silence. Then it happened again. Another bump, more forceful this time. The kayak tilted, and I nearly went over. I didn't wait for a third strike. I paddled back to shore faster than I've ever moved in my life, my arms burning, expecting any second to be pulled under. When I finally dragged the kayak onto shore, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I stood there on the beach, staring out at the water. That's when I saw the ripples. Not natural ripples from wind or fish. These were moving in a deliberate circle, about where I'd been floating. Something was down there. Something big. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon convincing myself it was just a sturgeon or maybe a large pike. Lake Vermilion had big fish. That's what I told myself. But the rational explanation felt hollow, especially when the sun started setting and I realized I'd have to spend another night there. I made dinner, locked all the doors and windows despite the heat, and tried to focus on a movie on my laptop. Around 10 p.m., I heard it. Footsteps on the dock. Slow, wet, deliberate footsteps. The wood creaked with each step. My blood went cold. I muted the laptop and listened. The footsteps continued, getting closer to the cabin. Then they stopped, right at the point where the dock met the shore. I couldn't move. I sat there on the couch, barely breathing, every muscle tensed. Minutes passed. Nothing. Just silence and the occasional sound of water dripping onto wood. Finally, I worked up the courage to look out the window. The dock was empty. No one there. But in the moonlight, I could see fresh, wet footprints, leading from the water to about 10 feet from the cabin door. And they were wrong. Too long. The toes splayed out in a way that didn't look human. I watched those prints for maybe 20 minutes before exhaustion and fear finally sent me to the bedroom, where I wedged a chair under the doorknob. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard something else, a scratching at the cabin wall, right below the bedroom window. Long, slow scrapes, like nails on wood. Then breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. So close it sounded like it was right in the room with me. I buried myself under the blankets like a terrified child, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The scratching continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 or 20 minutes. Then it stopped. When dawn finally came, I was out of that cabin within 30 minutes. I didn't even pack properly. Just threw everything in my car and left. Before I drove away, I made myself check the exterior wall below the bedroom window. There were gouges in the wood, deep ones, for parallel scratches, each about an inch apart. And at the base of the wall, pressed into the soft dirt, was a single print. It looked almost human, but the proportions were all wrong. Too long, too narrow, the toes webbed. I never went back to that cabin. My uncle sold it the following spring, though I never told him why I refused to return. He said the new owners complained about strange sounds at night and found dead fish arranged in circles on the dock. They moved out after 3 months. The place has been empty ever since. Sometimes, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I still hear that breathing, and I think about those footprints that just stopped, like whatever made them simply evaporated, or was standing there, invisible, watching me through the window. I don't swim in lakes anymore. I don't even go near them, because I know now that some things don't stay in the water where they belong. I worked as a security guard for 3 summers during college, and the last shift I ever worked still makes my hands shake when I think about it. This was late August 2019, and my name's Riley. I was 21, broke, and counting down the days until I could quit and focus on my senior year. That final Saturday night, I was assigned to Riverside Park, a sprawling, 70-acre public space on the outskirts of Portland that closed at 10 p.m. The job was simple. Drive around the park roads, check that gates were locked, make sure no one was camping or partying in the woods. It was usually boring work, and that's exactly what I was expecting. The park emptied out pretty fast once the sun set. Families packed up their picnics, joggers finished their routes, and by 9:30, it was just me and the trees. I started my rounds at 10:15. The main loop road circled the entire park, about a 4-mile drive with my headlights cutting through the dark. Everything seemed normal at first. I checked the north gate locked, drove past the empty playground, the equipment looking eerie in the shadows, past the picnic shelter, the restrooms, the boat launch, all quiet. Then I got to the eastern section, where the park bordered the river, the road that got narrower, trees pressing in on both sides. My headlights picked up something in the middle of the road ahead. I slowed down. It was a child's bicycle, one of those small ones with training wheels, lying on its side. The front wheel was still spinning slowly. That made no sense. The park had been empty when I'd started my rounds 15 minutes ago, and I'd driven this exact road. The bike hadn't been there. I stopped the truck and got out, my flashlight sweeping the surrounding woods. "Hello." My voice sounded too loud in the silence. "Park's closed. If someone's out here, you need to leave." Nothing. Just the sound of the river flowing past, maybe 30 yards through the trees. I picked up the bike. It was wet, like it had been in the water, and loaded it into the truck bed. Protocol was to take any lost items back to the office. I got back in and continued driving, but something felt off now. That prickle on the back of your neck, like you're being watched. A quarter-mile later, I saw the second bike. Same type, also lying in the middle of the road, also wet. My mouth went dry. I stopped again, but didn't get out this time. I sat there, engine idling, staring at that small bicycle. 2 identical bikes. I grabbed my radio to call my supervisor, but all I got was static. No signal, which was weird because the radios usually work fine. That's when I saw the child standing at the edge of the road. She was maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a white sundress that looked soaked through. Her hair hung in wet strands over her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there about 20 feet ahead of my truck, caught in the headlights. My first thought was relief. A lost kid explained the bikes. Then I registered how still she was. Unnaturally still. No shivering despite clearly being wet and cold. I opened my door. "Hey sweetie, are you okay? Where are your parents?" She didn't respond. Didn't even seem to hear me. I took a step toward her, and that's when she moved. Not like a child moves. She tilted her head slowly to one side, too far, at an angle that made my stomach drop. Then she raised one arm and pointed past me, back the way I'd come. I turned to look. There were more of them. 5 children, maybe 6. It was hard to tell in the darkness, standing in a line across the road behind my truck. All of them soaking wet. All of them perfectly still. All of them staring at me. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. I scrambled back into the truck, slammed the door, and hit the gas. The little girl in front of me didn't move. I swerved around her, my heart in my throat, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. The truck fishtailed on a narrow road, branches scraping the sides. I didn't care. I just drove, but I had to finish the loop. There was no other way out. The road only went one direction, through that section of the park. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. My headlights bounced crazily as the truck jolted over potholes, and then I saw them again. They were ahead of me now, though that was impossible. The same group of children, standing in the road. I'd passed them. I'd left them behind. How were they in front of me? I didn't slow down this time. I drove straight at them, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. At the last second, they scattered into the trees, moving with that same wrong, too fast fluidity. My headlights caught glimpses of wet hair, pale skin, and something else, their eyes. Empty, completely black. The rest of that drive is a blur of panic and adrenaline. I kept the accelerator floored, taking curves too fast, not caring if I crashed as long as I got out of those woods. When I finally reached the main gate, I didn't stop. I drove straight through the chain link fence, snapping the lock, and didn't stop until I was on a highway with streetlights and other cars around me. I called my supervisor from a gas station, told him there were kids in the park, that something was wrong. He sent police. They searched the entire park that night and found nothing. No children, no footprints, but they did find something else. 17 bicycles, all children's bikes with training wheels, piled in the river at the exact spot where the park road came closest to the water. They'd been there for years, weighed down with rocks. Some of them dated back to the 1980s. I quit that night. Didn't even go back for my last paycheck. The park stayed closed for 2 weeks while they dragged that section of river. They didn't find any bodies, but they stopped searching eventually. Too expensive, they said. Not enough evidence. But I know what I saw. Those kids were real, or had been real once. Sometimes I wonder if they're still there, waiting by the roadside for the next person to drive through after dark. And I think about that little girl pointing behind me, trying to warn me about the others. Or maybe she was pointing at something else entirely, something I was lucky enough not to turn around fast enough to see. I still live in Portland, but I don't drive anywhere near Riverside Park. Not during the day. Definitely not at night. My name's Jordan, and I grew up in rural Iowa, where the cornfields stretch for miles in every direction and your nearest neighbor is a 15-minute drive. Late summer, right before harvest, those fields get tall, sometimes over 8 feet, and they make this sound when the wind moves through them. A rustling, whispering sound. I used to love that sound. Used to. This happened in August 2020, my last summer before I left for trade school in Des Moines. I was 18, working for my dad doing maintenance on the farm equipment, and generally enjoying those final weeks of freedom. Our property was about 200 acres, most of it planted in corn, with our house sitting at the center like an island in a green ocean. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in the machine shed working on a combine when I heard our dog, Rusty, going absolutely crazy. He was a big German shepherd, tough as nails, and I'd never heard him bark like that, frantic, terrified. I dropped what I was doing and ran outside. Rusty was at the edge of the cornfield, about 40 yards from the shed, barking and snarling at the stalks. But he wouldn't go in. He kept lunging forward, then jumping back, like something was daring him to enter. "Rusty, here," I called. He ignored me, which was unusual. He was well trained, always listened. I walked toward him, and that's when I saw it. The corn was moving. Not from wind. There was barely a breeze that morning. This was deliberate movement, like something large was pushing through the stalks, parallel to the field's edge. Something pacing back and forth, staying just out of sight. I grabbed Rusty's collar and dragged him back to the house. My dad was in his office doing paperwork. When I told him what I'd seen, he shrugged it off. "Probably a deer," he said. "Maybe a coyote. They got into the field sometimes." Though he agreed Rusty's reaction was strange. We went back out together, but whatever had been there was gone. The corn was still. Rusty refused to go near that field for the rest of the day. That night, I couldn't sleep. My bedroom window faced the fields, and around 2 a.m., I was lying awake when I heard it. That rustling sound, but rhythmic. Too rhythmic, like footsteps. I got up and looked out the window. The moon was almost full, bright enough that I could see the cornfield clearly, and I could see the corn moving, a path of motion cutting through the field, heading straight toward the house. Whatever was making that path was tall. I could track its movement by watching the tops of the corn stalks sway and part. It was moving on 2 legs. I know that sounds crazy, but I could tell by the gait, by the pattern of disturbance. Something bipedal was walking through that field, and it was getting closer. I watched, paralyzed, as it reached the edge of the field closest to the house, maybe 20 yards from my window. The corn went still. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, something rose above the corn. A head, shoulders. It was silhouetted against the night sky. Too far away to make out details, but I could see it was massive. Easily 7 feet tall, maybe more. And it was looking at the house. Looking at my window. I ducked down so fast I hit my head on the windowsill. My heart was pounding like a drum. I stayed there, crouched below the window, for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, it was gone. The next morning, I told my dad. He didn't believe me. Thought I'd had a nightmare, or maybe had seen a shadow and let my imagination run wild. He agreed to walk the field with me anyway, humor me. We found the path. A clear trail through the corn, stalks bent and broken, leading from the far end of the field right up to the edge near the house. The plants were snapped 3 to 4 feet off the ground, like something had walked straight through them without trying to navigate around. "Deer," my dad said, but his voice was uncertain. "Deer don't move in straight lines like that. They wander zigzag." This was purposeful, deliberate. He called it vandalism, said someone had probably run through the field as a prank. I didn't argue, but I knew better. No person could move through corn that tall and thick without struggling, and whoever had done this had moved quickly. That night, I slept in the living room, or tried to. Around midnight, I heard scratching at the front door. Slow, methodical scratching, like something testing the lock. Rusty was whimpering, pressed against my legs. My dad must have heard it too, because he came downstairs with a shotgun. He turned on the porch light and threw open the door. Nothing. No one there. But there were marks on the door. Long gouges in the wood, too high up for any animal I knew. They started about 6 feet off the ground and dragged downward. My dad's face went pale. He closed the door, locked it, and we spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room with every light in the house turned on. The next day, my dad called the sheriff. They sent a deputy who looked at the gouges, the path through the corn, and basically told us he'd keep an eye out. That was it. No investigation. No real concern. The message was clear. We were on our own. We decided to harvest that field early. My dad wanted whatever was using it as cover gone. We started the next morning, and I was on the combine cutting the corn when I saw it again. I was about halfway through the field when something moved in the standing corn ahead. Not running away from the machine, running parallel to it, keeping pace. I could see the stalks shaking in a line, maybe 30 yards to my left. I radioed my dad, who was on the other combine, and told him what I was seeing. He said to keep going, finish the job. So I did, but my hands were slick with sweat on the controls. The thing in the corn kept pace with me for another 10 minutes. Then it stopped. Just stopped moving. I continued forward, the combine eating through the rows, and suddenly I was at the spot where it had been. There was a cleared circle in the corn, about 15 feet in diameter. The plants hadn't been cut or knocked down. They were just gone, stalks ripped out of the ground entirely. And in the center of that circle were bones. A lot of bones. Deer mostly, but other animals too. Raccoons, possums, what might have been a coyote. All of them stripped clean and arranged in a pile, like an altar or a nest. I stopped the combine and got on the radio. My dad came over, saw the bones, and his face went gray. We called the sheriff again. This time they sent 2 deputies, and they actually seemed concerned. They took photos, collected some of the bones, said they'd send them to Des Moines for analysis. We finished harvesting the field that day with the deputies watching. We didn't see the creature again, but I felt it watching us from the remaining patches of unharvested corn waiting. The bones came back as just animal remains, nothing unusual, but the deputies couldn't explain the circle or the arrangement. No predator does that. No animal collects its kills and displays them. The sheriff suggested we'd stumbled onto some kind of cult activity, teenagers doing weird rituals. My dad pretended to accept that explanation, but I know he didn't believe it any more than I did. We moved off the farm that October. My dad claimed it was for retirement, that he'd been planning it anyway, but I know the real reason. We never saw the creature clearly, never got close enough to identify what it was, but it had claimed that land, marked it, and we weren't welcome anymore. I drive past that property sometimes when I visit home. The new owners planted corn again this year. I wonder if they've seen it yet. Wonder if they've heard the footsteps at night, or found the circles of bones. Part of me wants to warn them, but what would I say? That something lives in those fields, something that walks on 2 legs and stands taller than a man? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am. But on those late summer nights when the wind is still and the corn is tall, I know it's out there, waiting, watching, and I know I'll never set foot in a cornfield again after dark.